Okay, so you've sent in a ton of material about how to improve the undergraduate experience,
Hmm.
and it's a lot to dig through.
Yeah, it really is.
So our goal today is to kind of like get to the heart of it.
Absolutely.
Find those key insights that can really help people understand
Yeah, what actually makes a difference.
what makes a difference.
Right.
And we're going to be looking at everything from the big ideas
The
to the
frameworks.
really specific things that institutions are doing.
Practical examples on the ground.
Yeah,
That's the goal, to connect theory and practice.
exactly.
Oh,
So let's jump in.
let's do it.
So one of the first things that really jumps out from all these materials
What's
is,
this question, isn't it?
yeah,
Like, what actually matters most for undergrads?
right, what matters most in college?
And I think one of the sources you sent really frames this beautifully.
Yeah,
It's not just about what's important,
yeah,
but what's possible when colleges really focus on the things that matter.
right.
And they offer this really helpful heuristic.
Okay, a heuristic.
Yeah, a framework of 6 core themes to guide our thinking.
Oh, okay, so it's not like a strict set of rules.
Exactly. It's more like a compass
I see.
to help point us in the right direction.
Gotcha.
And those themes are pretty straightforward.
Okay, lay them on me.
Learning matters.
Learning matters.
Relationships matter.
Okay, makes.
Expectations matter.
Yeah.
Alignment matters.
Uh-huh. I was trying to see a pattern here.
Improvement matters.
Okay.
And leadership matters.
Okay, so those are our six.
Our 6 core
Or
themes.
6 pillars.
Yeah, you could say that.
All right, so let's start with the first one.
Learning matters.
Learning matters.
That seems pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, you go to college to learn?
Well, yeah, but it's more nuanced than that.
Okay, so it's not just showing up for class.
No, it's about institutions really taking responsibility for student learning outcomes.
Okay, so it's more proactive.
Exactly. And it's about creating opportunities for learning both inside and outside the classroom.
So it's a holistic thing.
It really is.
Okay, so how does that actually play out, like, in real life?
Well, one of the sources talks about the importance of helping students integrate their learning experiences.
Okay, connect the dots.
Exactly.
Different disciplines, even different parts of their lives.
Right.
And they give this great example of Carleton College.
Okay.
They have these initiatives like visualizing the liberal arts and a global engagement program,
Okay.
which were specifically designed to help students make those connections.
I see. So it's like intentional program design.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about being really thoughtful about how we structure those learning opportunities.
Right. So it's not just hoping that students figure it out on their own.
Exactly. And the source also makes this really interesting point
Okay, what's that?
that meaningful learning is often messy.
Messy, how so?
Well, it involves struggle,
Okay,
making mistakes,
right.
and even failure sometimes.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Oh, it's not always fun,
Right.
but it's essential.
Okay. How so? Well, there's this great quote in the material from Martin Covington.
Okay.
He says that mistakes are an inevitable part of successful thinking.
So it's like you learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that struggle is actually a sign that you're pushing yourself and growing.
I see.
So institutions need to create environments that support that kind of productive struggle.
So not just punishing students for making mistakes.
No, it's about reframing failure as an opportunity for learning.
Okay. I like that.
And it's not just about the
Oh, right. Faculty and staff, too.
Exactly.
Okay.
This theme of learning matters applies to everyone on campus.
Yeah, how so?
Well, the material talks about this contrast between what they call a narrative of constraint
Okay.
and a narrative of growth.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So in a narrative of constraint,
Mm.
professional development for faculty and staff is seen as like a chore,
Uh-huh.
something you have to do just to check a box.
Right.
But in a narrative of growth, it's seen as an opportunity for continuous learning and improvement.
I see. So it's like a mindset shift.
Exactly. And that shift can have a huge impact on the entire campus culture.
Because if everyone is learning,
Yeah, if everyone is growing.
then that creates a much more dynamic and supportive environment for students.
Precisely.
Okay, so that's learning matters.
Uh-huh.
What's next?
Well, next up, we have relationships matter.
Okay, relationships matter.
This one is all about the importance of human connection.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The quality of the relationships that students have with faculty, staff, and their peers
Mm-hmm.
can have a profound impact on their experience.
Right. I mean, college is more than just academics.
It really is. It's about the whole person.
Right.
And these relationships can provide support,
Okay.
mentorship,
Uh-huh.
a sense of belonging.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And one of the sources highlights Duke University as an example.
Okay.
They've been really intentional about creating opportunities for students to build meaningful relationships
Okay, how so?
through things like undergraduate research,
Mm,
civic engagement,
okay.
and interdisciplinary learning.
So it's like building those connections across different parts of the university.
Exactly.
I see.
And the material also mentions this fascinating poll from Gallup and Purdue University.
Okay, what did they find?
Well, they found that graduates who had at least one professor who made them feel excited about learning,
Okay.
who cared about them as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and who encouraged them to pursue their dreams
Okay.
were much more likely to be thriving later in life.
Wow. So those relationships really do have a lasting impact.
They really do.
And it's not just like warm, fuzzy feeling.
No, it's about concrete outcomes.
Right, like career success and overall well-being.
Exactly.
But I thought it was interesting that the data showed only a small percentage of graduates actually had that experience.
Yeah, that's a bit concerning.
Right, it suggests that we have a lot of room for improvement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it highlights the need to be really intentional about fostering these kinds of relationships.
Right, it's not something that just happens automatically.
No, it takes effort.
Okay, so what are some strategies for making that happen?
Well, the material points to some really compelling examples,
Okay, like what?
like Yuri Treisman's work with calculus students at Berkeley.
Okay, I've heard of him. What did he do?
Well, he found that students who worked together in groups
Okay.
and who shared their intellectual interests
Uh-huh.
were much more likely to succeed.
So it's like the power of peer support.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to create opportunities for students to connect with each other.
Not just with faculty and staff.
Right. And the material also makes this really important point
Okay.
that anyone on campus can be a mentor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just professors.
Right.
It could be coaches,
Uh-huh.
staff members,
Okay.
even alumni.
So it's like expanding the circle of potential mentors.
Exactly. And they give some really cool examples of simple but effective initiatives.
Okay. I like those. What do they have?
Oh, there's Elon University's College Coffee.
College coffee. What's that?
It's a regular informal gathering where students, faculty, and staff can just come together and chat.
Okay.
It's a low-key way to build community and foster those
I
connections.
like that.
And they also talk about how the physical design of campus spaces can play a role.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like Hampton-Sydney College has these outdoor gathering spaces
Okay.
that are specifically designed to encourage those chance encounters and conversations.
So it's like architecture can actually facilitate relationships. I
Exactly.
never thought of that.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But there's also a challenge that's highlighted in the material.
Okay, what's that?
The increasing reliance on part-time faculty and staff.
Right?
It can be harder for them to provide that consistent mentorship and support that students need.
Yeah, because they're often juggling multiple jobs.
Exactly. And they may not be as integrated into the campus community.
Right.
So the source makes a strong argument for investing in permanent faculty and staff
Okay.
as a way to strengthen those relational aspects
Yeah.
of the undergraduate experience.
So it's about creating a more stable and supportive environment.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's relationships matter.
Uh-huh.
What's next?
Well, next up we have expectations matter.
Okay, expectations matter.
This one is all about the power of high expectations.
So believing that students can achieve great things.
Exactly, and communicating those beliefs effectively.
Right, because just thinking it isn't enough.
No, you have to let students know that you believe in them.
And that you have high expectations for them.
Exactly.
And the source actually brings up these classic studies called Pygmalion in the classroom.
Yeah, those are fascinating.
So tell me about them.
Well, basically, they found that when teachers had high expectations for their students,
Mm-hmm.
those students tended to perform better.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. Our beliefs about others can actually influence their behavior.
That's pretty powerful.
It really is.
But it's not just about having high expectations.
No, it's also about how you communicate those expectations.
Right, because you can't just say, do your best.
No, that's too vague.
And it doesn't really give students a sense of what they're aiming for.
Exactly. The source contrasts these kind of generic statements with more specific and supportive messaging.
Okay, so like what would be a good example?
Well, instead of just saying work hard, you could say something like, I know you're capable of mastering this material, and I'm here to support you every step of the way.
Okay, so it's about being clear
Specific.
and encouraging.
Exactly.
And the source also raises this concern about the possibility of low expectations in higher education.
Yeah, that's a real issue.
And they point to data from the National Survey of Student Engagement,
NSSE.
which shows that students sometimes report spending a surprisingly low amount of time on their studies.
Yeah, that's a bit worrying.
Right.
Hmm.
It suggests that maybe we're not challenging them enough.
Or maybe they're not feeling motivated to put in the effort.
Right. So how do we address that?
Well, one strategy is to be very deliberate about setting clear expectations from the start. And they give this example of Northwestern Louisiana State University.
Okay, what do they do?
Well, they have this student-centered philosophy statement
Uh-huh.
that's prominently displayed in all their offices.
Okay.
And it explicitly outlines what's expected of staff in their interactions with students.
So it's like a public commitment to high standards.
Exactly.
I like that.
And they also talk about the importance of setting those expectations early on.
Okay, so even before students arrive on campus.
Yeah, like Elon University has this Are You Ready summer online program.
Okay.
And Stella and Charles Gutman Community College has a really intensive summer bridge program.
Okay.
And both of those are designed to prepare students for the demands of college-level work.
So it's like setting the tone early.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that Gutman's graduation rates are so much higher than the national average for open admissions colleges.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
It really shows the power of early intervention.
It does.
And it's not just about setting expectations.
No, it's also about reinforcing them
Okay, how so?
through institutional policies and practices.
So like walking the walk.
Exactly.
And they give this example of Fayetteville State University.
Uh-huh. They have this approach of balancing high expectations with strong support.
Okay, so it's not just about being demanding.
No, it's about providing students with the resources they need to succeed.
And they give the example of allowing students to resubmit essays.
Yeah, that's a great example.
So it's like giving them a chance to learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. And they also have these required weekly professional preparation days.
Okay, what are those?
Well, basically, it's dedicated time for students to work on things like resumes, cover letters, and job searching skills.
So it's like building those career readiness skills from the start.
Exactly.
And they also talk about the University of Houston's AWH in 4 program.
Yeah, that's a really interesting model.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's basically designed to help students graduate on time.
Okay.
And they actually offer a guarantee, of course, availability and financial aid
Wow.
for students who meet certain criteria.
So it's like a clear pathway to graduation.
Exactly. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the process.
I like that.
And another important element of managing expectations is providing timely and ongoing feedback.
Right. Because students need to know how they're doing.
And they need that feedback early enough to make adjustments.
Exactly. And the source actually points out that traditional midterm grades often come too late in the semester to be truly helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's about finding ways to give students more frequent feedback.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about what's expected of the students.
No institutions also need to set high standards for their own performance.
Right, and communicate those standards clearly to students.
Exactly. And they give this cool example of Georgia Tech.
Okay, Georgia Tech, what do they do?
Well, they have a 24-hour response guarantee for residence hall maintenance requests.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it shows that they're really committed to providing a high level of service to their students.
And it sets a clear expectation of responsiveness. So it's not just about telling students to work hard.
No, it's about showing them that the institution is also committed to excellence.
Okay, so that's expectations matter.
Uh-huh.
So I say.
Well, next up we have alignment matters.
Okay, alignment matters.
This one is all about making sure that everything is working together.
Okay, work together, how so?
Well, it's about aligning an institution's resources, policies, and practices
Okay.
with its educational goals and the needs of its students.
So it's like making sure that everyone is on the same page.
Exactly. It's about creating a coherent and consistent experience for students.
Okay.
And the source gives this great example of the University of South Carolina.
Okay.
They have this initiative called USC Connect.
USC Connect.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what is that?
Well, it's a comprehensive effort to connect in-class and out-of-class learning
Okay.
through things like purposeful experiences, guided reflection, and e-portfolios.
So it's like intentionally weaving together different aspects of the student experience.
Exactly. And it's all very intentional and well-planned.
I see.
And they also talk about Newman University.
Okay.
They have this model where they align their orientation program, first-year seminar, general education, curriculum, learning communities, and advising.
Wow, that's a lot of alignment.
It is, but it's been very effective.
How so?
Well, they've seen a significant increase in student retention.
That's great.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to create a smooth and supportive pathway for students.
Right, from the moment they arrive on campus.
Exactly.
And the source actually critiques the idea of the hybrid university.
Yeah, that's from Kevin Carey's book, The End of College.
Right.
And they argue that this model often leads to a lack of focus on undergraduates and teaching.
Okay, so it's like the institution is trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah, and it can end up diluting the quality of the undergraduate experience.
I see.
And then they contrast that with Christopher Newport University,
Okay.
which has this really comprehensive approach to alignment.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, they have an early alert system to identify students who might be struggling. They have clear and consistent communication about available resources,
Okay.
and they have intentionally designed residential learning communities.
Wow, so it's like they've thought of everything.
They really have, and the results have been pretty impressive.
Like what?
Well, they've seen significant increases in both retention and graduation rates.
So it's like that alignment really pays off.
It does.
And they also talk about West Virginia Wesleyan College.
Uh-huh. They have this anatomy boot camp.
Anatomy boot camps.
Yes, designed to provide extra support for students in a particularly challenging course.
Anatomy's tough.
It is, and they've seen a big drop in failure rates.
So it's like targeting support where it's needed most.
Exactly, and for
Wow.
transfer students, the University of Central Florida has this Direct Connect program,
Okay.
which provides a really seamless pathway from partner community colleges.
So it's like making that transition as smooth as possible.
Exactly, and interestingly, students in the Direct Connect program actually graduate at a slightly higher rate than those who start directly at UCF.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, and they also talk about challenging students to actively align their own learning.
Okay, how so?
Well, Hendrix College has this Odyssey program.
Odyssey.
Uh,
What's that about?
well, it encourages students to connect their classroom learning with hands-on experiences in 6 different categories.
6 categories, like what?
Well, things like global awareness, artistic creativity service, to others, undergraduate research and internships.
Wow, so it's like a really well-rounded experience.
It is, and the college actually provides grants to support student projects.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly.
And then there's Georgetown University.
Uh-huh. They have this 4th credit option for social action program.
4th credit option for social action program.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is. Tell me more.
Well, it allows students to earn general education credit for doing community engagement.
Okay.
But the key is that it involves structured reflection and dialogue.
So it's not just about doing the service.
No, it's about connecting it back to their learning. I see. And this theme of alignment matters really highlights the need for institutions to move away from operating in silos.
Right, those separate departments that don't really talk to each other.
Exactly, and to function more like interconnected systems.
So it's like breaking down those walls.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
they actually point out that sometimes it takes a dedicated central unit,
Okay.
like USC Connect or DePaul Central,
Mm-hmm.
to really foster that cross-institutional connection and cooperation.
So it's like someone has to be in charge of alignment.
Yeah, someone has to be the champion for that.
Okay, so that's alignment matters.
Uh-huh.
What's next?
Well, our 5th core theme is improvement matters.
Okay, improvement matters.
This one is all about continuous improvement.
So always striving to get better.
Exactly. And it's about institutions being really honest with themselves
Okay.
about how they're doing.
So like taking a hard look in the mirror.
Exactly. And using data to track their progress and identify areas where they need to improve.
So it's not just about gut feelings.
No, it's about being evidence-based. Okay. And the source gives this amazing example of CUNY's Accelerated Study in Associate Programs Initiative.
That's ASAP.
Yeah, ASAP.
Okay, tell me about it.
Well, it's a major effort to improve community college graduation rates
Okay.
by removing barriers and providing comprehensive support to students.
Like what kind of support?
Well, they provide Metro cards so students can get to campus.
Okay.
They cover the cost of textbooks, and they even offer tuition waivers.
Wow. So it's like they're really invested in student success.
They are, and the results have been remarkable.
Like what?
Well, ASAP students graduate at more than double the rate of non-ASAP students.
That's incredible.
It really shows what's possible when you provide the right kind of support.
And the material outlines 7 key action principles for fostering a culture of improvement.
Yeah, those are really helpful.
Okay, what are they?
Well, first they say that assessment is fundamental.
Okay, so you have to measure what you're doing.
Exactly. You can't improve what you don't measure.
Right.
Second, you have to focus your assessment on what matters most.
So not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data.
Right. It has to be meaningful and actionable.
Third, you have to commit to using the evidence.
Yeah, it's not enough to just gather the data. You have to actually do something with it.
Right.
Fourth, you have to involve everyone in the process. Faculty, staff, students, even alumni.
So it's a collaborative effort.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Well, fifth, you have to adapt best practices.
So learning from what other institutions are doing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Sixth, you have to cultivate positive restlessness.
Positive restlessness, what's that?
Well, it's this mindset of always striving to get better.
Okay, so never being satisfied with the status quo.
Exactly.
And the last one.
Well, the seventh principle is that leadership has to model improvement.
So it starts at the top.
It does. Leaders have to set the tone.
Okay, and the source really emphasizes the importance of assessment being problem-specific and user-centered.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that your assessment should be focused on answering specific questions
Okay.
that are relevant to the people who will be using the data.
So it's not just about collecting data in a vacuum.
No, it's about using data to solve problems.
And they give some good examples?
They do, like St. Olaf College.
Okay.
They did an assessment of their senior essays in religion,
Uh-huh.
and they also looked at the effectiveness of team-based teaching methods in management.
Okay. And what did they find?
Well, they found some areas where they could improve,
Okay.
and they made some specific changes based on the data.
So it's like closing the loop.
Exactly. Assessment should lead to action.
And they even talk about the University of Missouri-Columbia.
Uh-huh. They used a mystery shopper program to assess customer service in their dining halls.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's a creative way to gather feedback from students.
And it shows that assessment can be used in all sorts of different areas.
Absolutely.
But the source also acknowledges that there's a big challenge here.
Okay, what's that?
Actually translating assessment data into meaningful change.
Yeah, that could be tough.
And they point to research that shows this is a common problem.
Like the Wabash National Study,
Right.
which found that institutions often struggle to use data effectively.
So it's like having all this information but not knowing what to do with it.
Exactly. And one of the reasons for that is initiative fatigue.
Initiative fatigue.
Yeah, basically it's when faculty and staff are overwhelmed by all the new initiatives and changes.
Okay. I can see how that would be a problem.
It is. It can lead to resistance and burnout.
And they give this example of Hope College.
Uh-huh. They use data from the NSSE on student homework time
Okay.
to spark conversations within departments about academic rigor.
Okay.
And it was really effective because it was very specific and relevant to faculty.
So it wasn't just some abstract data point.
No, it was something they could actually relate to.
And they also talk about the University of Missouri-Columbia.
Uh-huh. They adapted learning community assessment practices from the University of Washington.
So they didn't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. They learned from what others were doing.
And it sounds like it was successful.
They significantly expanded their learning community program.
That's great.
And this idea of positive restlessness is really key to this whole theme of improvement matters.
Okay, so tell me more about positive restlessness.
Well, it's this idea that we should always be looking for ways to get better.
Okay.
Even when things are going well.
So it's like a healthy dissatisfaction.
Exactly. And it's about being open to new ideas and approaches.
And they mentioned Sean Harper's research.
Uh-huh. He cautions against focusing solely on the perceived deficits of certain student populations.
Okay, so not just looking at what students are lacking.
Right. It's about recognizing and building upon their strengths.
That's important.
It is. And they give this great example of Gallaudet University.
Gallaudet, the University for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
Exactly.
Okay, what do they do?
Well, they've been really intentional about creating learning environments that meet the unique needs of their students. And they call it Deaf Space.
Deaf space.
Uh-huh.
So tell me more about that.
Well, it's about things like lighting acoustics and visual cues
Okay.
that are designed to facilitate communication and learning.
That's fascinating.
It is. And one of the things they do is they have this ritual of establishing visual connection at the start of every class.
Okay, what does that look like?
Well, basically, everyone makes eye contact with each other before the class begins.
Okay,
It's a way of acknowledging each other's presence and creating a sense of community.
I like that.
And it's a great example of how questioning assumptions can lead to really innovative and inclusive practices.
And they even talk about Purdue University.
Which has a very high retention rate.
Okay, so they're already doing well.
They are. but they're still committed to continuous improvement.
How so?
Well, they had this initiative called Foundations of Excellence.
Foundations of
Uh,
Excellence. What's that about?
well, it's basically about looking for ways to make their already strong programs even stronger.
So it's like not resting on their laurels?
Exactly. And it shows that even high-performing institutions can benefit from this mindset of positive restlessness.
Okay, so that's improvement matters.
Ah,
What's our last theme?
well, last but not least, we have leadership matters.
Okay, leadership matters.
This one is all about the importance of strong and effective leadership.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's not just about having a charismatic leader at the top.
Okay, so it's more than that.
It's about creating a culture where leadership is distributed throughout the organization.
So everyone feels like they have a role to play.
Exactly. And it's about articulating clear aspirational goals
Okay.
and nurturing an inclusive institutional culture.
So where everyone feels valued and respected,
Exactly.
and they give this example of the University of Louisville.
Uh-huh. They have this Paul Weber Award for Departmental Excellence in Teaching,
Okay.
which recognizes departments that are doing great work in teaching and learning.
Okay.
And it's a great way to incentivize and reward collaboration.
Because it's not just about individual faculty members.
No, it's about departments working together to improve student learning.
And they also talk about the challenge of institutional silos.
Yeah, those pesky silos.
So how do you break down those silos?
To take strong leadership,
Okay.
provosts and deans need to be really intentional about fostering connection and collaboration.
So it's like creating bridges between different parts of the institution.
Exactly.
And the source also emphasizes the importance of being willing to take risks.
You can't achieve great things without taking some risks.
Right.
And they tell this inspiring story of Laura Gambino,
Okay.
who left a more traditional academic path
Okay.
to become a founding faculty member at Gutman Community College.
Wow. So she really took a leap of faith.
She did, and it was a risky move,
Right.
but it was also a really courageous one.
And it sounds like it paid off.
It did. Gutman is now a nationally recognized model for student success.
That's amazing.
And they also talk about Miami-Dade College.
Oh.
They took some bold steps to improve student completion rates.
Like what?
Well, they revised their curriculum,
Okay.
and they invested heavily in advisors.
Okay.
And those decisions were driven by data.
So they were being strategic.
Exactly.
And they also talk about the importance of dynamic planning, execution, and communication.
Yeah, that's crucial.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that institutions need to be agile and responsive to changing conditions.
Okay.
And they need to communicate effectively with all stakeholders.
Faculty, staff, students, alumni.
Everyone.
And they really